Hey, this is LOA Today, the Law of Attraction show. Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and Joel Elston here. It's Thursday, November 24th, 2016. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And normally people would expect us on Thanksgiving to be doing our Law of Attraction show about gratitude. And we are grateful. Don't get us wrong, but we're not doing gratitude as our main topic this week because, Joel, we go against the grain. The LOA gurus go one way, we go the other.
That's sort of our secret to success, Walt.
I think it probably is, yes. But we're going to actually focus on something that is really just as important as gratitude, and that's resilience. Because unless you're resilient, being grateful once and then just forgetting about it isn't going to do it. You got to be consistent about it and persistent, and you have to stick to it. And it's not just with gratitude; it's with every aspect of the law of attraction. So it's really quite important.
Well, in resilience I happen to believe resilience is sort of the basis in which the law of attraction can grow. And you really believe, you really start to fall into that pattern of the positive, the right things are happening. You have to be resilient in your pursuit because it's easy to try it for 5 minutes and it doesn't work and then give up on it. And I see multiple people that have actually had sort of the opposite of resilience to me is learned helplessness. It's where you're in a place where you're helpless. You believe that there's factors at work in your life that have cursed you. There's no hope, and you've given up all chances or all hope of a better life because you're just cursed. And being resilient and not buying into that concept and understanding no matter what you're going through, there is another side. You can come out. You're going to be strengthened by this event. And that's the difference between what I believe people that are successful in using the law of attraction in their lives in a good way, and those that sort of have the law of attraction happen to them is sort of how I view it. It's a big difference.
It is a big difference, and I like the term that you use, learned helplessness. I know where that one comes from. That's actually a Martin Seligman term. Right now, of course, he's currently part of the positive psychology movement, but he used to be part of the negative psychology movement. And when he wrote the book about helplessness, he was kind of on that side of the fence. But nevertheless, it's a very useful concept because it helps us understand that most of the time we're allowing ourselves to be trapped by simply learning how to be trapped. And then once we learn it, we stick to it. And that's really where all the bad things start happening to us. So, interesting thing, when many people come to wanting to understand the law of attraction, they do so because they're not happy with the way their lives are going. And I can't think of any situation where I've met somebody who had something like that going on where there wasn't learned helplessness going on. It's a major problem.
Well, you see it in families, and it just gets handed down, especially the work that I do. Where you're often seeing families that have repeated cycles for generation. Yeah. Whether it's poverty, whether it's a single parent situations. I've always been fascinated, and this isn't the most positive start, but it's a concept, and we'll pull out of this, I promise. But years ago, I was working at a crisis center in Tampa, and I had a lady that came in, and she had been abused by her husband. Physically abused. And one of the most amazing things, Walt, and this isn't funny, but it was just baffling to me. In doing her history, she had 7 men in a row that she dated that all physically abused her. And I was baffled by the fact that, and I tried and had great empathy for her because I could see that she was in a pattern.
Oh, yeah.
But it was clear to me that she had to take action to find 7 people in a row who were going to do that. What she was looking for was attracting the same thing each time. And I don't know the outcome with her, but I know that for us to change, stop being victimized by our own belief system and move on, that's where being resilient comes in. I'm going to change everything. I'm going to change the way I'm doing things. If what you have been doing isn't working, it's not logical to keep doing what you've been doing, but yet that's what everybody tends to do.
And your example is really interesting because it points to the fact that people do, like you say, that this becomes a recurrent thing. It becomes generational in many, many cases for these kinds of things to happen. And because it's so recurrent, what you're actually seeing is people who work to set themselves up. And that to me is the most interesting part, the fact that they work at it. They don't necessarily see it as work, but they are working pretty hard, because you have to go out of your way to find 7 guys in a row who are going to abuse you. That takes some doing. It doesn't just automatically happen. So it takes work. And yet how easy it is for any of us who are in a negative pattern like that to say to ourselves it's too much work to get out of it.
And it is work, because we're perceiving it as work, because we're changing what our comfort zone is. You don't believe, one of the things that I had to come to terms with is when I'm working with people, if you're making $50,000 a year and you come to me and you say, I would like to make $1 million a year, it's not likely we're going to be able to do that using the law of attraction, not because of the lack of the power of the law of attraction. You deep down don't believe you could go from 50,000 to $1 million. You don't really believe that. So, or it would be happening in your life. So one of the things that I try to do is say, okay, we're at 50. Do you believe you can make 60 next year, which will be a reasonable increase? And most people could say, yes, I can see that's in the and then halfway through the year when they're on pace to make about 65, then I can say, well, why don't we change our goal to 70? And then it almost always works, because people it's a tangible goal they can believe in. I can't right now. I really can't imagine. I can imagine it, but being a billionaire is something that I can't comprehend, because it's something that I have no way to feel what that feels like. Having a lot of money or being in a good financial position is something that I can understand, but taking it to that extreme level is something that I can't. So it has to be within your real belief system that could exist. And when we talk about the being resilient, it's being resilient in your belief, not allowing years of training or years of negative reinforcement to keep becoming the norm of fallback, being resilient against that, pushing against that, changing the narrative in your head and that inner dialogue. That's where the resilience comes in, because things are going to happen. We're not trying to sell to our audience life events don't happen. They will. There's going to be job loss. There's going to be loss of all types. We're going to lose some family members. We're going to lose relationships. Things are going to happen. It isn't those things that we're worried about. It's our response to those things that have conditionally in the past have conditioned us to keep looking at change as negative. I lost my job versus I'm now open for a new opportunity. And it's a hard mindset to get into, but once you are resilient in that pursuit, then that becomes a second way of thinking.
It does become a second way of thinking. It also becomes an opportunity, because I went through, I don't want to get into the negative side because we've been too much in it already, so I won't go into the details of the story. But this past week, I had a very real experience with falling off of the resilience bandwagon, so to speak, and it was Thursday and Friday. I was just feeling defeated on something I've been working on for the longest time, and it was affecting my behavior. It was affecting my ability to get my job done. It was affecting my ability to get things done in general. I was in that stuck in the amber place, right? And when that kind of thing's going to happen to anybody. I mean, I don't care how much you're into this; it's going to happen at some time or another. You have that story that you told a number of weeks in a row about the terrible Thursday, one day out of the year.
Right, exactly.
but nevertheless, it happens, and even when it does happen, that's when you have to take on a new kind of resilience. That's one of the things I learned this week. My form of new kind of resilience was I'm usually fairly self-sufficient. I'm usually I'm good at reaching deep down and finding the reconnection and finding the things to feel good about and so forth. And I was not succeeding in doing that. So I reached out to a friend and I said, I'm in this place right now. And he helped cheer me up. He helped me get out of that funk that I was in. So sometimes you have to ask for help. And that's what's cool about your job, Joel, because you're getting that kind of request all the time and you're able to help people all the time. That in itself has to be rewarding.
It is. And it's also, believe it or not, it much as I'm helping and you're hearing, I have filtered it very much in a positive way. When people come to me with all these issues, I don't side with the negative emotion. I get excited about what's going to happen for these people. So it's a lot of people get in this field and they get burned out. They start thinking of, well, this is this is too much to deal with. I can't handle this. But I look at it when people come to me with all these issues. I know what it can be now. So I get excited about what's happening for them. And just like you're saying, knowing that you need to reach out, being resilient is not being, by any means, being stubborn and not asking for help. Being resilient in thought is not giving up on this process. That's what I believe our topic is really talking about. We have, I know when I lost my job at the treatment center that I used to previously worked at, I had no intention of leaving. I had bantered with the idea of going in private practice, and it was a normal Friday, and I had noticed a change and I try not to have a negative thought process around things, but I noticed that the owner of the company was acting a little different toward me, and his right-hand person was sort of, which I used to be, had sort of moved into that position, was sort of acting a little different toward me. But I said, well, it's just, I'm ignoring all that. Doesn't matter. Well, over that weekend, through a chain of events, I all of a sudden was unemployed, and very high paying job in a company that I thought I was going to be with, forever. And so I was shocked by that. But the thing that I had learned up to that point was everything that had happened to that point in my life had been a positive. And so I was shocked that there was really no negative. I went to a very, very grateful place for what that job had brought to the table for me. I knew it was going to work out, and it was an odd feeling because there was not a moment of doubt. It just was, wow, I've been wanting to do this, and by wanting to go into my own practice, I probably manifested that, and this is how we ended up here. So why am I going to be upset about what I've wanted? And it turned out it fulfilled itself. I ended up making more money for the rest of the year than I would have if I would have stayed with that company. Got into a private practice where there were certain negative aspects to that job that I didn't enjoy. There's a lot of positives as well. Well, I was able to remove all negatives in my life, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine being there. So that uplifting process, when you're resilient in this pursuit, you get into that default mechanism. So even when you lose your job, I never for once was fearful of what was going to happen either, which I found to be amazing because that was the first time something that major had ever happened that I was able to think that way and feel that way.
And that's a major victory all by itself, just that you were able to do that. That's the kind of thing that many of us aspire to. But you're right, and that is the way to handle it. It's the way to look at it. And I mean, my wife has a great way of expressing it. She says when you're trying to go in a certain direction and you keep running into a block, it means you got to change direction. Sometimes life does the direction changing for you if the universe says you're not changing quickly enough. And that's an example of it. You kept pushing into a blockade at work. The blockade was resistance to some of the law of attraction stuff that you were talking about, and it didn't really work with them, and it wasn't the direction they wanted to go in, and it played a role in you ending up leaving, and you ended up going in a much better direction as a result. Well, that was the law of attraction standing in your way and saying, go this way instead, and you did.
And I did. And on top of that, the resilient piece that I would not allow that mental attempt of going backwards in my way of thinking of, well, those people wronged me. Those people did,
Oh, you could have done that easily. Very easily.
Yeah, I could. And I could argue that I was wrong, but I don't view it that way. I was given an incredible opportunity with this company. That company gave me connections I never would have had. The owner of that company, while we had our differences at our departure, I very much am grateful for the opportunity he gave me. Half of what I'm dealing with right now, I can directly, as far as my good stuff in business, those connections were made while I was at that program.
Wow.
So all of that to me is a very positive, or I could focus on they treated me poorly, or I could have done this, or, the idea that I get, somebody would ask me, was I going to file unemployment? And I laughed and I go, I'm not unemployed. I've never been unemployed. I haven't. I just changed jobs. Now it wasn't my choice, and there was I took about a couple of weeks off, but I'm not unemployed. But it's just that, again, that perspective that drives it, and being resilient and refusing to fall back into what that negative, that old-fashioned negative way of thinking brings to the table. It's something that was a default way of thinking, and the narrative is played out. I had, when I left that company, I had either, I don't know, we had probably 30 employees, 25, 30 employees. And with the exception of one or two, I had heard from each one, very supportive, and they all were like, "Oh, we're so sorry." And I was like, "There's nothing to be sorry about. I'm moving on to a new thing." And I kept that narrative in that direction because I would not buy into the fact that I was victimized here at all. I brought it about. I saw how I did it. I was at a point I wanted to leave. It's hard to leave a job. It's really hard to leave a job when you're making really good money.
Oh yeah.
And you're in a rhythm. You're well respected, and plus I was very loyal to my staff, and I didn't want them to sort of have to be there without me as a filter for them. But at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about here. Being resilient in your belief. And then eventually, this is where we go with, that's the exciting part about the law of attraction. When you get, you almost do it without energy or effort. It just happens, and that's the place. I'm still not totally there. I would love to say that I'm completely there, but I understand that can happen, and I keep striving for that.
You also mentioned something there, kind of in passing almost, about how you used to be a filter for your staff when you worked at that agency, and that now you were no longer there. Well, that's another law of attraction thing going on there, because for whatever reason, and I don't know the specifics, so I won't try to speculate what they were, but for whatever reason, that staff was in need of no longer being shielded. They had they had some need that the universe was helping to set them up for, that basically would say, you got to start dealing with this ownership. You got to start dealing with them directly, and whatever the issues are that are involved, you have to start facing that stuff. And that's part of their own growth process. That's part of their own opportunity sets of, you have the opportunity to start applying the law of attraction to your benefit, or you can just do the same old default stuff and suffer the consequences. It's up to you. That's what they were faced with.
And many of them, and I'm not claiming it was because of me, but over the next 2 or 3 month period, probably 90% of them left.
Really?
And
wow.
Yes, it moved on to new ventures. And that and again, that's I'm not by any means making a statement that was because of me. I'm just saying that just the timing of it. But and I'm still in contact with most of them, and they're all, for the most part, thriving. Some went to different careers. One gentleman that I was very close with and remain close with, he went into real estate. He's very successful in real estate now. So many people are in private practice. So it is a chain of events when you look at things. No matter what is happening, that's remaining resilient in thought and not believing that line that most people are being sold, that we are somehow victims of everything. That over the recent presidential election, I've heard so many people talk about how scared they are and how fearful they are of what's about to happen. And again, not to do politics, but in general, you're going to invite what you're fearing. That's what you're bringing to the table, and not allowing some entity that you believe is just sort of cursing you or chasing you or going to affect your life. That's such an important thing.
Oh, yeah.
Very.
Absolutely so. By the way, another player in that little drama that you went through was the ownership themselves and the new right-hand person, right? Because they were the right-hand person, I'm sure, was brought in to replace you because the owner was resistant to the idea of including law of attraction. And look what the consequences were. By doing that, by basically refusing to face up to the role of the law of attraction in his life, he lost 90% of his staff. That's a hard lesson.
Well, it is. And also, that they have gone in a different direction. He has a successful treatment center that's still in business. And it's I think they're doing fine. I don't have any direct contact. But it's a different direction than where I was taking it, and I'm fine with that. It's something that...
I was just looking at it from his point of view. I mean,
sure.
In one sense, he ended up with what he wanted, with what he was trying to attract, but by the same token, the only way he could get there was by using the law of attraction to get there the way he did, which he did, put himself through some difficult times to do it. I'm just kind of curious, in my own mind, I don't think it's any question you could answer, but I'm curious in my own mind, I wonder what's going on in his psyche now where the law of attraction is concerned, because he played it out perfectly to a T.
Right. And I don't know what concept or how he's at, where he's at with that, but we have things that happen, and it all is, while we appear to be engaged and entwined, the law of attraction is operating independently, and it's up to the law of attraction to incorporate it into the big picture. I'm telling you a story, or I'm telling you my situation from my perspective.
Right.
While there would be, if he were to tell a story, it would be a different story. If my employees that were working with me before were to tell a story, they might have a different story.
Sure.
Or not that the facts would all be the same, but it would be how it affected them. And I love how the law of attraction, I don't look how it all figured out. As I talk about often, my place of refuge is the bench that I go to in Florida on Anna Maria Island.
Yeah.
I find it amazing that Sunday that my employment ended with that company, I'd already had a flight booked down to Florida.
No kidding.
Wow. That's the amazing thing. I was leaving the following Thursday to go down to Florida. So I'm like, wow, okay, well, that timing, that was beautiful.
That couldn't be way better, actually.
Right, and I had worked for many, many years without a day off, so I'd already set in my mind that I'm going to take a month off and just do that. So I went down to Florida, and the part that I found amazing is again, no thought of negative stuff. I knew something was going to come up. I'd had, within 2 days of being me leaving the company, I had 3 job offers. Now, none of them were exciting to me, but people were calling me, interested in me coming to work for them. And again, that was a good sign. I said, well, I want to, I'll keep everybody in mind, but I want to see where this goes. And I, again, wanted to be in private practice for myself. So when I was at the bench in Florida, randomly, one of my dearest friends and guru, and one of the people that I find, his name's Dr. Sherman Master. He's a psychiatrist. He's nationally known, and we've become very close when we were working at the previous company. And he had left a year or so before I did. So he called and he said, well, I heard, are you okay? And I go, I didn't know what he's talking about at first. I go, yeah, I'm fine. Is something wrong? And he goes, no, you're not with that company any longer. And I go, oh my goodness, yeah. I said, well, and he knew the scenario, and he said, well, I'm shocked you lasted as long as you did. He said, I have an empty office space in my building. I know you wanted to talk about a private practice. When you get back to town, come see it. If you want it, it's yours.
Wow.
So I didn't even have to look. I mean, it was all set up for me.
It just got handed to you. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And this isn't a place that you go in and you they don't advertise for space. This is a office building that you have to be asked to come into. So it's like, wow. So again, and I'm saying that with, again, giving a story from my perspective. I don't view the world simply as I only see it from my perspective, but I want our audience, so you can do the same thing when you change where your mindset is. What is this leading to? There's always exciting things. I'm always excited to hear about what is around the corner. Like I talked about earlier, when I get a new client in and their world is total turmoil, and I'm looking at it like, wow, I can't wait till they get on the other side. They're not going to understand how great this is. And it really helps them. Mm-hmm. It really does. To watch that, to be able to have a front row seat and see lives change. That's one of the best parts about my job is somebody walking in the door that's not even functioning, and they turn their life around. Sometimes in a session or two. Sometimes it's longer, but it's just amazing when you start hearing them reporting how the law of attraction has worked on their behalf, how their perspective instantly changed everything. And that's such a powerful tool when you apply it correctly.
So cool, too, to be able to see that on a daily basis. I mean, because that's your job. Your job is to see that all the time. And I know it's the old contrast thing once again, but I just contrast that with the way most therapists operate, because I know that most of them follow more traditional models, certainly not the crazy, wild-eyed law of attraction stuff that you do. And I think to myself, how much better their careers could be if they just gave it a try. I mean, the opportunity's there. And that's another aspect of resilience. It's being willing to go ahead and do something despite the fact that that's not where the crowd is going.
And Walt, one of the things that I have been baffled about, and I need to work harder on understanding this myself. I actually have 2 or 3 therapists that are clients of mine, and they have greatly benefited from the law of attraction. And I find it almost really unimaginable that they can't still, because they're so rigid in their professional life, they can't seem a way to be able to meld that into their practice. It's fascinating that they have great success with it, but yet somehow it doesn't translate into them using it. Now some do, but it really is how people can get stuck in some patterns. Well, that worked for me, but for my clients, I have to use this 1950s model of social work that I learned, and somehow that's going to be effective for people, and it does work for some people. But it's finding your wheelhouse. I don't know who doesn't benefit by some law of attraction work or positive psychology, all of that. All those concepts are exceptionally effective, and anybody that doesn't incorporate it is I'm baffled by that, especially when it's worked in their own personal life.
And another law of attraction thing going on, they regularly, like you said, they're applying it in their own lives. They're getting the experience of it directly with you, and yet lack of whatever it might be, lack of confidence perhaps, or maybe it's just plain fear. Whatever it is, they keep resisting the lesson that the law of attraction keeps trying to give them, that, hey, this works, hey, this works, hey, this works. It's like, oh, geez, I don't know if this is going to work for my clients. Hey, this works, hey, this works, hey, this works. Well, this may not work for my client. It's funny. It's strange that people do that. But I guess it shows how deeply embedded fear can be in our systems.
Well, absolutely. And that to me is such a the fear that you hit on. The fear drives so much, and people get into that fear is it creates worry. Worry is probably the word. I'll speak from my perspective. Worry is my most dangerous position mentally.
Oh yeah.
As far as the law of attraction,
I agree completely.
Worry is it is brutal. Worry is brutal.
I don't know who invented worry, but I wish they didn't.
Yeah, it really serves no purpose. And I come from a line of professional warriors. So my mother, I think, may have been the 1960s through 1990s world champion warrior.
I saw her picture in the dictionary when I looked at the word.
You look up worry, it's my mom. And if she doesn't have anything directly to worry about, she will figure out something to worry about.
Right.
And I love my mom very much. I just find it. And again, if you look at the psychology,
hey, my mom does the same thing. I'll be perfectly honest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my mom grew up a child of an alcoholic, so every moment she's overly processing her thought processes and scanning the horizon for problems. And sure enough, you're going to find them. It really is a fascinating thing when you're constantly scanning the horizon for problems. They'll be out there. Just as you're scanning the horizon for positive and great things, they're out there too.
Another example of the law of attraction. You can attract stuff to worry about.
Yes.
And people are very good at it.
Oh, well, that's the tide that we're fighting against. It's not individuals. We're talking about years, generations of somehow there being a narrative that the negative worry-based way of thinking or driven life is what causes it. I've always been fascinated by the reading, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and those of you that aren't familiar with the book, there's tons of free copies online. It's public domain now, or you can actually order various copies. But Think and Grow Rich, this gentleman, Napoleon Hill, he went around during the Depression, right around the Depression, and he was fascinated by people that had remained wealthy or had become wealthy during the Depression. How come they were doing it, and what was different between them and the masses? And he quickly got to the point of the law of attraction, what we believe, what we think about, if you really believe, that's why he came with the title, Think and Grow Rich. When you think you're rich, you'll be rich. When you really believe it, you'll get there. It's not he says in the beginning of the book, this isn't about some mythical wealth. This is about real stuff. And he talked to these people, and that was the one thing in comedy. He said, I talked to some really dumb people, some really smart people. There's people that inherited money that lost it. There's people that had no money and built up a vast fortune. And they were in the worst economic times of our history, the history of our country, really. And they were able to develop great wealth. And he found that commonality was a belief that you're going to be rich. And he extrapolated from that being rich is not amassing wealth in the way that most people think. It's about a mindset of wealth. You have that. Our president-elect he willed his way to the presidency using the law of attraction. He really did. He had no business being on that stage, but yet he just kept, and people believed it, and he never doubted he's going to win. That's just what the guy has done his whole life. He wins.
Yeah, that's true.
And he does it, and he buys us and he sells us on the fact. Now, I hope he's very successful. I hope everything goes in an incredible way for our country, as I do with our last president, the president before that. But he certainly is someone that has, whether he intentionally uses it the way he uses it or not, he is one of the masters of the law of attraction. He doesn't always use the positive side, but he certainly knows how to use it.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. He uses the negative side with just as much, ability and satisfaction and success as he uses the positive side, which I certainly don't choose that, but apparently he does, and he does it to his own advantage, which is a little spooky.
Well, it is, but it also shows, as we have talked about, the law of attraction isn't about right or wrong, good or bad. It's just about mastering your own thought process,
right.
And that's the thing, and it's a lot of people of faith. A lot of times, your fundamentalist Christians, for example, or your hardcore Muslims, or any of those. They view this as almost, it's not a religion, and it doesn't go against a religion. It's simply a way of thinking. It's gravity doesn't go against religion, and that's a concept that I hope our audience realizes. We're not asking you to change. We're not asking you to change anything about your personal beliefs as far as religion goes. We're asking you to change your beliefs about the negative thought process. Negative thinking isn't working, or it is working, but it's not working in the way you want it to work.
Yeah, that's really the distinction. I mean, you talked about Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich, and actually, Napoleon Hill never used the phrase law of attraction. I'm not sure the phrase really existed in the English vernacular at that time.
He did. He described it. He didn't use the word, yes.
In fact, he didn't really seem to have a word for it. I don't remember the exact wording, but the gist of it was, if this book is for you, you will know it by reading it. You will know it by what is written here. And then he also talked about an unshakable belief, which is what you're talking about. He talked about this unshakable belief that the people who succeeded wildly beyond their dreams had, and it was the one thing they all had in common, that unshakable belief. Well, that's what you just described. Donald Trump certainly has that unshakable belief. I personally take comfort from the fact that presidents usually don't accomplish anywhere near what they think they're going to accomplish. So I'm okay with Donald Trump being in there. But even so, that unshakable belief does amazing things.
Well, and that gets to that resilience of thought, that unshakable, that resilient thought process of I am going to achieve this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get in this position. And if wealth is what you're after, then wealth is what you have to believe. You can't operate and if you've tried the same thing for 10 years or 1 year or whatever period of time, I'm going to get wealthy this way. And it isn't working, then if you keep pounding that same drum, and you don't get there, the universe is saying there's another avenue. You're not open to it.
Yeah, Mike Dooley has a great way of expressing that. He says, don't just pick up one rock, pick up all the rocks.
Exactly. And that is such a breath of fresh air in this concept that I love, that most people miss. we get honed in on one course of action, and that is such a scary place to be in, where the law of attraction, quit identifying how you want the law of attraction to fulfill what you're after, and understand it's going to do it on its own terms, and that's important.
It's an interesting thing too when you decide to stick to being resilient, when you decide to say, I'm just going to keep doing this law of attraction thing no matter what, even though I'm not getting the results that I'm looking for. I'm just going to stick to it and stick to it and stick to it. When you keep doing that, a funny thing starts to happen. One thing that starts to happen is you stop hanging on to, well, it's got to happen this way. Because I know I started that way. I have many times started projects thinking, well, this is the way it's got to work out. I can see rationally this is the way it must play out. And then it doesn't play out that way. And you can stay stuck in there for the longest time. But eventually, life kind of wears you down. And you get to the point where you just kind of give up on it. And then you just try something else. And then you get a result out of it. And then you try something else and you get a result out of that. And eventually you find yourself in a place where you're no longer just married to one concept. You're just trying, okay, law of attraction, send me some stuff. I'm just going to try stuff. I'll keep trying stuff until I get where I want to go, until I get the result that I'm looking for. And then that's when the magic starts to happen.
One of the movies that I early in my introduction to the law of attraction, In Pursuit of Happiness is a movie with Will Smith, and it's a true story, and it's about a computer salesman who is in California, I believe, and he's a long story, but the basis of it is he is selling an antiquated computer right at the turn of when we started getting into PCs. He was selling just these sort of a Macintosh and old version of that, and he was trying to sell it to businesses, and he was walking around with this big clunky model, and he was just driven to sell that, and he was stuck on that course of action, and his wife ended up leaving him, calling the police on him, and he ended up being a single dad, homeless single dad. And he runs across this guy who was a stockbroker, and he's like, what do you do? He sees a guy driving a Ferrari. So, well, wow, how did you get here? And long story short is he gave up on that computer thought and said, I need to go in a different direction. He started at the bottom, like most stockbrokers do, making phone calls, and today he's one of the wealthiest traders in Chicago.
Oh, wow.
And not Will Smith, but the role he's playing in the movie. Right. And it's an incredible movie. I recommend it highly because it is a law of attraction thing, even though it never uses the word law of attraction. It's that same idea that you go out there and look at it, savor it, believe it. Don't get stuck on what you've done this so long and it's not working. Why are you still doing it? And that's where what most people think resilience is. I will keep at it. Resilience is not keeping at something that's not working. Resilience of thought, resilience of positive thinking is what we're talking about. Not I know for years I have my second home, I call it, South Carolina is where I went early in my recovery, and ended up in Rock Hill, South Carolina. In the beginning, I really hated the town, and I've really grown to love the area as maybe equal to where I grew up. And I got there right after the NAFTA trade deal had hit, and textile mills in South Carolina used to be huge. Mm. And they made a lot of money. They didn't require really any education, and people were making $20 an hour in textile mills. It was considered one of the great jobs. Mm-hmm. They were huge employers.
Right.
So all these people had no education, but they were making really good money, and they get $20 an hour plus about 10 hours overtime a week. So they're all living relatively comfortably. Oftentimes, husband and wife both work for a company, and you go around South Carolina, these massive buildings, these massive industrial buildings are all over the place. And they were cranking it out. Well, when the free trade agreement came in, most of those jobs went to Mexico, where instead of $20 an hour, they're going to do them for $3 an hour.
Right.
Well, there was a group of people that most people in South Carolina hung on to the concept that, that they would, when a lot of the companies were saying, look, we can't do this here. You're going to have to either take $10 an hour so we can compete, or we're going to have to shut down. Well, a lot of the people say, oh no, well, we're going to strike. We're going to do this. Well, a lot of times when they started striking, they just shut down the company. So, okay, well, we tried. And so they were stuck. So it became a very negative, depressed place to live. And it took a long time. There's parts of South Carolina that have never recovered. Pageland, South Carolina. There's some areas of South Carolina that are just really, really poor because they lost their mill industry. But they were stuck on one course of action. Some of the more progressive towns saw that coming, and Rock Hill is the town I spoke with before. They offered a lot of free training. BMW in Spartanburg opened up this massive plant and trained this. There's a lot of people that had switched over, being willing to look at new opportunities. They're doing much better with BMW than they ever would with a cotton mill, but it's something that is a growing industry. So the South Carolina's caught on a little late, but they're really starting to thrive. They have a great workforce, and looking at it from a perspective of, wow, I lost this, but instead of the loss, what is new? What's next? Where are we going now?
Absolutely. In fact, the same story applies to the North about 30, 40 years ago, because it used to be that the United States was the number one country in the world for steel production. And particularly in Pennsylvania, towns like Pittsburgh and Allentown and so forth were huge, huge steel producers. And then pretty much the same kind of thing happened. It wasn't NAFTA. It was just, the normal effect of world trade. But the Japanese in particular and other nations started getting involved in steel production. They did it at a fraction of the price that the U.S. was doing it. And the response of the labor unions in the U.S. was, well, we got to strike to stop all this stuff. And they ended up killing off some of the major steel companies that had been gigantic producers in this country. So places like Allentown, I mean, everybody knows that Billy Joel wrote a song about Allentown and about what happened when the steel factories all got closed down and how the town basically went into ruin. Well, Pittsburgh had very much the same experience, but Pittsburgh today is a completely rejuvenated town.
Yes.
And I don't know what the situation is in Allentown. Maybe they've rejuvenated too, for their sake. I hope they have. But Pittsburgh today is now an IT town.
Yes. And that's the resilience in thinking. It's not getting stuck on one train and keep riding that train to the same direction. But if I get on a train to New York, I can't be shocked when the train stops at Grand Central Station. I got on a train to New York. That's what that train does.
Right.
It's the idea that we get on these trains of thoughts and they end up in the same place. And that's where most people get stuck. So the exciting part, the energetic part to me, is you can get on a new train anytime. And there's new trains leaving the station every day. It's just learning and having the faith and courage to get on that new train.
And it's also having the faith in yourself to be willing to pivot your attention. Because you have to be willing to make that pivot. If you aren't willing to make that pivot, the law of attraction can't deliver anything else to you. It can only continue to deliver the same failed results that you continue to get, because that's what you keep focusing on. You keep focusing in that one direction, and that one direction leads you to negative. Well, hey, come on. Even reason tells you it's going to keep pointing toward negative. You can't. It's like the 12-step cliche, right? That you can't keep producing results that, or keep doing things that produce negative results and expect them to produce positive results. That's insanity.
Right. And that's exactly the way of that depth and breadth of thought where. I have many people. A friend of mine was this is a great example. He repaired appliances for years. He is an expert. If you have a broken refrigerator, he can go repair your refrigerator instantly. I mean, he's amazing. Well, our society has changed, and unfortunately, the generator, the compressor for the refrigerator you have in your house, the newer refrigerators, if it's not in warranty, the compressor of that refrigerator costs more than a new refrigerator.
Yeah.
So it really worked. He realized at some point, after he kept holding on to being the appliance repair guy, And he said, my business is, he was doing a lot of warranty work, but outside of that, when somebody's he finally started recommending to people, okay, the compressor is going to cost $900. My labor is going to be $150. They have this exact model on sale right now for $900.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he realized that no matter how he tried it, he can't hold on to that way of doing it. However, he also realized that all these new refrigerators come with a 1-year warranty. So he started taking training for all these refrigerators and all these appliances to become that certified warranty person for those refrigerators or whatever appliance.
I'll tell you.
He has a huge business now.
That's cool. Go ahead. Did you have more to say?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Oh, okay.
No. It's a great business, and he adapted, and that's that resilience of thought. Instead of getting stuck on that other model, he had to adapt his model to match what was happening in the market.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I'm going to tell you a story about. It's a little bit related to the experience I talked about earlier about kind of getting stuck and not feeling so resilient this past Thursday and Friday. But I have been trying to follow this pattern of, okay, one thing isn't working, so try the next thing. And the new next thing that I've been working on is a new kind of jobs website. It comes from, first of all, it's specifically focused on manufacturing. And the reason that we're focusing on manufacturing is that manufacturing is kind of in a strange place right now. There's a popular belief that manufacturing is dying and that it's really an industry that has nowhere to go. In reality, it's actually been thriving, which is not what most people have been led to believe, but almost all manufacturers are doing very, very well. The problem they have isn't that they're not getting work. The problem they have, believe it or not, in an area where there's high unemployment, is they can't get enough workers, which sounds counterintuitive. When you look at it more closely, what you really find is there are plenty of workers out there. There aren't enough skilled workers. In other words, there aren't enough workers who are skilled at being, say, CNC machinists or something like that. The specific skills that they need in order to have somebody, play a key role in their factories. Well, that kind of a problem can really become quite exacerbated, particularly when the employer, and this is a very common problem we found, the employers are very often people who want somebody like a CNC machinist who is a very highly specialized, highly skilled machine operator. They want a CNC machinist with 30 years experience to walk in the door, sit down, and just start producing without having to train them and without having any fears that they're going to go work somewhere else and without paying them a premium wage. Well, as I described that to you, you could tell that's not going to work.
Right, of course, right.
That's just not realistic. But that's the mindset that so many of them have. And it was when we realized that's what the mindset was, and we realized that there's a tremendous need for skilled labor. My friend and I are doing this together, and we realized this is an opportunity. Okay, so that's what got us into working on creating this new website. And it's actually going to be more than just a jobs website. It's also going to be a site for promoting people who are not currently skilled to become skilled, helping them create ties to educational institutions and even doing work for job training and stuff like that, where basically the employer pays for your training. So there's going to be a number of programs like that we're going to try to set up. So a number of factors going on here. First of all, there's us shifting gears to try to meet a demand that we're spotting that we really hadn't paid any attention to before, a demand that nobody else is really fulfilling. We're doing it in a way that's different because all job sites, well, not all of them, all the well-known job sites are all generalists. They all give, listings for any kind of job out there. We're focusing on one industry. That's unusual. That's not the way things are normally done. But it's a way we think it's going to work out pretty well. And add in the fact that manufacturing is doing so well, it means that we're very likely to be able to get customers out of this without having to work too hard. And because it's a job site, it's not like you're charging thousands of dollars for this, to get somebody a job. It's, a few $100s to place your ad. So it becomes much more affordable. So there's a whole bunch of factors going on that are really good. Now, you hear that story, and then you begin to wonder, well, why was Walt struggling so bad last week on Thursday and Friday, losing his sense of resilience? It seems like that's counterintuitive. And it is. It seems crazy that I would be in that place, and yet I was. It shows that anyone can fall into it, despite the fact that this wonderful opportunity is opening itself up. To me, I still fell into it. And so that's why it's good to reach out for help. It's also why it's good to remember and to remind ourselves how this whole process works. And it's really, really good to remind ourselves the role that resilience plays in the whole thing.
Right. And that is so key. I'm so glad you shared that. And the resilient piece of us, we have no problem holding on to things that aren't working. And I find that interesting when we're asked to give up what's not working, we have a lot of resistance, like we talked about last week. But when you sort of reframe resilience, you're trying something new. This is something new, but yet some negative thoughts or some feelings again that have been inherited from previous times come up now, and they come to bite you, and you fall back into it. So that's where reaching out to help. The resilient piece isn't that you felt that way. The resilience is you reached out to have someone help pull you up. That's the resilient piece, and that goes beyond what most people understand about resilience. Don't give up on the thought. And when you need help, ask for it. Not help with the project as much as help with the mindset. You could do the project. The mindset's what matters.
And interestingly enough, I also got help with the project because within the last few days that led up to that period, my friend was bringing in a colleague of his who I also know, who is a photographer, videographer, and they're now putting together a couple videos for this new website. So that just came out of nowhere. I mean, I wasn't even expecting it to happen, and boom, it just kind of appeared on the stage, so to speak. So there's an example of how the previous resilience that I'd had up until those 2-day period had led to this thing to emerge at the time when I needed it most and when I least expected it.
Yes, and that's how at least it happens for me. I have I have stuff come in all the time that I'm not even realizing. I have a friend that's starting a new program here in town, and he asked me if I would be interested in doing some groups or even working there full time. And so I'm certainly not interested in working full time, but I would be glad to do some groups or help out. And now that might be something that I dabble in and get a couple extra hours work a week, or it may be something that really becomes a significant thing. But either way, I'm resilient in thought that this is part of my ongoing process. And I also don't know that it doesn't lead me to another thing. And that's the piece that I was brainstorming. I had a $1 billion idea in my mind that I don't have the ability, the technical knowledge, or whatever to deal with or develop, but it's such a no-brainer. And that concept was, one of the most successful websites right now is Airbnb, where you're renting out rooms or whatever. That it's really successful. Right. Well, as an independent contractor myself, every city has tons of empty office spaces going empty all day. There's many restaurants that are closed during the day. They're only open for the evening, especially in New York. There's a lot of space where if I have to go see a client in Atlanta, there's no reason that I don't have the ability to go on and say, look, I need a conference room in Atlanta across the street from the, Peachtree Hotel. And boom, here's a conference room, $100. You book it here. You come in. You have the use of it for an hour or two. That would be a wonderful thing. That would be, Airbnb for business. It's amazing. It's a brilliant idea. The idea of Airbnb as being such a successful site, and the idea that there's a commercial side of that as well. I know in my office complex, I'm not in my office every day. If somebody could book it online, have a key waiting for them, they could use my office. I could make an extra $50, $100, $200, $300 a week. If somebody wanted a professional office space in Richmond and they didn't want to go through a whole lot of stuff, that's one of the ideas that I've had. Well, I've told a couple of people about it. Everybody says, well, that's a great idea. Well, I don't have the ability, the time, or the desire to pursue that, but I do think it's a good idea. And just like you're saying, there's tons of ideas out there that if I don't have it, I share that with other people. Hopefully somebody one day takes that and becomes wildly successful. I really do. It putting that out there, the right person is going to pick it up. It's not for me, but it's a thought that I've had. It's a thing that somebody will do something similar to that in the next year or two.
It's a cool idea. It's a very cool idea. And by the way, and I'm sure you've already figured this part out, you don't have to be an IT specialist in order to pull off an idea like that.
Oh, right.
You can hire people to do the work for you. In
exactly.
fact, the most successful CEOs of the most successful companies, they couldn't operate any of the machines or do any of the selling themselves. It would be beyond them, but they know how to run the company.
That's the key. And so with the reason I even tell that specific one is when you reach out, when you talk to people, when you brainstorm, when you do all this stuff, there are ideas that I will have an idea that I'll openly share with someone else. Somebody else will have an idea they openly share with me. And the stuff that doesn't match me will match them. And that's the stuff that's how what you did this week. You reached out, you're remaining resilient in thought, you're asking other people for thoughts and ideas, and that's what I'm hoping that our audience can realize. Don't hesitate. Isolation is horrible when you're in the middle of a negative thought process.
Oh, it's the worst place to be by far.
Yes. And reaching out to people who are of similar mind, of positive thought. I have people that come see me that don't really need to be seeing me any longer, but they like the idea that once a week they get a very positive boost. It helps get them through the week. So I have people that continue to come after we really accomplish our goals that enjoy being lifted so much. That's a really big thing for them.
Well, see, I figured that out a year ago, because I got you to start doing this show with me. So I get the same benefit just by doing this show with you.
Well, and that's what we talk about that every week.
Yeah.
While I'm certainly glad we serve our listeners, and one day I want this to really be a big factor in our lives when our radio show goes big time.
Oh, yeah.
But in the meantime, I really enjoy every week having this reminder, putting this back in perspective, and we've been pretty consistent, and we make sure that it doesn't always fit, but we always figure out a way to fit it in, and that's a very important thing.
And we also have managed, this is the really cool part, and it's the thing that I'm trying to learn how to replicate in the other areas of my life on a more consistent basis. We've managed to take each show this week, and we did it again this week, we've managed to take each show and, yes, spend some time on the negative, but then bring it into the positive. That skill set is at the core of what it takes to succeed with the law of attraction in terms of attracting into our lives what it is we want most. And we practice that now. Every week that we do this show, we practice that. And it's wonderful. It's like a self-training that we do it often enough and it starts to take hold. And when it takes hold, that's when stuff starts to come out. That's where the fruit starts to come out of the whole thing.
Every session that I do with clients, I'm insisting on them walking out the door feeling uplifted. And I'm insisting on that.
It's a good thing to insist on, because when you insist on that, you basically do two things. First of all, you're helping them. You're helping them to say, I've got to refocus. I got to be resilient. I got to stick with this. I've got to be determined to get myself into that pivoted, changing state of mind where I'm in a more positive state. And at the same time, you're also reinforcing and training yourself to do the same thing. So you get double benefit out of it.
Well, you do. And every morning when you wake up, the reason we wake up every morning of our lives, no matter, you can break it down to one simple word, is hope. Mm-hmm. We hope today is going to offer things that if there was no hope, we would have no reason to wake up. Reminding our audience, you wake up, you suit up, you show up, and that positive direction, I'm going to have a great day, intend to have a great day, focus on the stuff that's a great day. What happened good today? And when you filter that all the good out in the day and you start focusing on that, more and more days start adding up to be more positive. And if you're having a day that's less than positive, reach out, talk to, listen to our podcast, listen to motivational speakers. Keep that focus. That's where the answers lie for the law of attraction.
And one final reminder before we leave the show, because we haven't touched on it this week, Well, of course, we're here on PRN. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us at our website, loatoday.net. There are a number of different ways you can subscribe. You can even find us on YouTube these days. So, Joel, we're really, really close now to having our dream come true because it's much easier than it used to be to find us, and that's a great thing. Joel, it's been a pleasure as usual, and we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.